Welcome back to another episode of Through the Eyes of Enji, where I'll be going through 101 films within 365 days, just trying to raise some money for We Are With You and the Shortbury Village Players. We Are With You are a confidential service for young people and families affected by drugs and alcohol in Shropshire. Their work includes information, support and advice about drugs and alcohol, one-to-one support, group work, parent carer helpline, help to make decisions about lifestyle, links to other services, early intervention and harm reduction. We're also raising money for the Shortbury Village Players. The Shortbury Village Players, if you've spent any time with me whatsoever, then you'll probably be aware of the Shortbury Village Players, a small community theatre group based in Shortbury, unsurprisingly, who put on pantomimes, put on Shakespeare, murder mysteries, and a range of other types of productions. Now, if you're anything like me and you have had a few issues with mental health over the last few years, then you'll understand, possibly as well as I do, what a tragedy it would be to lose something like the Village Players. So, we're doing Enola Holmes. Okay, Enola Holmes, released in 2020, directed by Had Bradbeer, written by Jack Thorne, based on the novel The Case of the Missing Marquess, an Enola Holmes mystery which was written by Nancy Springer. The film stars Millie Brown as Enola Holmes, Henry Cavill as Sherlock Holmes, Sam Claflin as Mycroft Holmes, Helena Bonham Carter as Eudora Holmes, and Louis Partridge as Tewkesbury. When Enola Holmes, Sherlock's twin sister, discovers her mother is missing, she sets off to find her, becoming a super sleuth in her own right as she outwits her famous brother and unravels a dangerous conspiracy about a mysterious young lord. This film was suggested by Astrid, therefore there will be no swearing and no bad taste jokes. Honest. Okay, so we find ourselves looking at a kind of Sherlock Holmes story. If you listen closely to that background noise, that will be the stampede of Sherlock fans who are currently racing the horde of Henry Cavill fans since The Witcher, racing to my door to demand that this must be a positive review. And it has to be positive because God forbid something Sherlock Holmes related not be perfect. I mean, not many of them would have read the original books. They're probably more likely fans who are have been fans rather, following Bendy Legs Cabbage Patch, playing him in the BBC show, which is a show that's had a shocking dive in quality. But we're not going to talk about that. And I'm also going to not talk about the brilliant Netflix show of The Witcher, nor about the fact that Netflix is proving to be truly adept at spotting gaps in the market and taking advantage. Although, if I was being really cynical, I'd be suggesting that they decided to stream this and not wait for cinemas to reopen because they thought they had the next Harry Potter and it would fit just perfectly in the market right round about the time the schools weren't open. Oh my god, that's really going to timestamp this review, isn't it? Anyway, to be honest, this isn't a Sherlock Holmes story. I mean, he's there, he's in the background, but this is very much the story of Enola Holmes, and it's absolutely glorious. So, again, like with Metroland, which, if you're interested, I have already forgotten about. I'd forgotten about it a couple of days after I watched it, around about the time I was writing this. I haven't read... Well, I've read a few of the Sherlock Holmes stories, but I haven't read any of the Enola Holmes stories. And while I was a little uncertain when I first heard about this film, partially because I still haven't forgotten the awful final season of Sherlock, which also had a whole Sister of Sherlock storyline, and also, to be honest, this is based on a series of books that are aimed at young women, as far as I understand it, made by Netflix. I'm not the target market here, I don't think, is what I'm trying to say. But, you know, when I saw the trailers, I was pretty interested, because it seemed to be a lot more light-hearted, and it's Henry Cavill, who I really like as an actor, especially when he's allowed to lighten up and have some fun, despite the fact... in spite of the fact that he is an actor with something of a limited range. But when he's allowed to play a character for laughs, or playing a character with no emotions, Geralt, then he does come into his own a little more. There was also a very little chance of Moriarty showing up, since I'm really sick of Moriarty after he's been done to death by Andrew Scott and keeps being forced in at every opportunity. I mean, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but speaking of the BBC Sherlock show, there is a bit of inspiration here. Maybe not with the writing, because the writing in Enola Holmes is really good and it's consistent, or with the sense of humour, because Enola Holmes has one, or even the sense of fun, which Enola Holmes has and the BBC didn't. Mainly, the inspiration seems to come from the musical score, the design of the posters, which almost give it the feeling it's linked in with the BBC show, maybe to boost interest in it. The film itself is much more concerned with its leading actress and the producer, youngest producer ever, by the way, Millie Brown, having fun, then let itself get caught up with things like weddings, adult life, and mind palaces. And speaking of which, Millie Brown is just great here. She's confident, but she's not overly cocky. She's quite clearly having the time of her life playing this role. Usually, in Sherlock Holmes stories, whether they be film, TV, whatever, Watson, the character of Watson, exists to act as an audience POV character. Someone for Sherlock to explain his brilliance to, which is a similar theme you see when you watch Doctor Who. The Doctor has a companion, someone to explain things to and give a point of view from the audience into this world. Now, Enola Holmes doesn't have that character, which, on a slight side note, this is the reason why Sherlock fans are apparently arguing that this film wouldn't fit into any kind of Sherlock Holmes canon, as it's based in the same year that Sherlock and Watson met, or the year Enola's born is the year they met. Apparently, this is important for reasons that, to be honest, I don't really care about enough to let it take up valuable brain cells. Therefore, we've got Enola breaking the fourth wall and speaking to the audience right from the get-go. And unlike other attempts to do this in films recently, and you know exactly which one I'm talking about, this isn't done for jokes, but it's more to endure the character to us, and it works really, really well. And it doesn't hurt, of course, that Millie Brown is, again, a really expressive actress who sells the character, who is, for all intents and purposes, a Mary Sue. An expert in armed and unarmed combat, disguises, code-breaking, chemistry, and investigation, which, when you think about it, that's Sherlock Holmes, just with the gender flipped. The big difference between those two characters is that Enola has something that Sherlock doesn't, is in that she has compassion for people, which Sherlock, quite famously, does not. And this is shown quite clearly in a pair of scenes where they both speak to the same woman about where their mother might be. And for Enola, it's very much a conversation between two people. And with Sherlock, it's very clearly an interrogation. And it's a really charming little scene. And did I mention this film's really charming? Because, good lord, it's really charming. As the revelation's hinting as to where exactly Enola's mother has actually gotten to, then the film does start to have a bit of a darker edge to it. And this might be a film that's really honest about which age group it's aimed at as its ideal audience, but it isn't afraid to go to some dark places and bring in some darker themes, because it trusts its audience to keep pace with the ideas, and it knows well enough what aspects of the film and the story the target audience are less likely to identify with, and it passes over them quite quickly. And again, this film's really honest about who it's aimed at. And while I was really swept up in the whole film very early on, with how easy it is to watch, how light, how entertaining, it's still got a really interesting central narrative and a very well-structured mystery. I'm clearly not the target audience for this film, and the bare bones of the two central mysteries are fairly textbook in how they come about. But then again, thinking of that ideal audience, there's nothing wrong with an audience finding out, potentially, given that age range for the first time, that it's not unusual for two mysteries to turn out to be the same case all along. And yet, I don't know if the mysteries and the puzzles aren't really the point, but more about this young woman discovering who she is, and I don't doubt that will probably resonate with the target audience, something fierce. So, as I'm going on now, trying to find some criticism of the film, and I'm really struggling to find criticism of the film, to be honest, keep that in the back of your mind, that I'm not a young woman. Honest. So I'm not target group for this. Now, speaking of the puzzles and the mystery, when the puzzles and clues continue to be solved as the film goes on, it's quite satisfying to watch. And the film moves along at a nice pace, and it doesn't hold still long enough to indulge itself in cliches. I mean, in a lot of what are called YA books, young adult books made into films, there's a need to spend time establishing that, yes, the young woman is really quite interested in a boy. But in Enola Holmes, there's just a quick look to the camera and a shrug, which just tells us everything we need to know. The economy of screen time is really well used here, and the pace is helped by our henchman, who's chasing the young Tewkesbury, and that he's played really terrifyingly by Bern Gorman, who seems born to play roles like this just with the look on his face, and Sam Claflin's the same for playing roles like Mycroft. But obviously, my favourite was always going to be Henry Cavill, playing by far the most buff Sherlock Holmes we've ever seen. And this might actually be my favourite version of Sherlock Holmes, because he grows as a person throughout the film and actually seems to care about another person without it being forced upon him too much. And it's quite telling, really, that the Doyle estate have actually raised legal proceedings in court against the makers of the film because they've changed the character too much from how he was portrayed in the original books, which aren't yet part of the public domain. Because Sherlock appears really quite likeable and not quite as aloof as he's normally played. I mean, Cavill's clearly having a lot of fun playing the role, and while he's part of Enola's life, he isn't the driving force behind it. And with how these characters develop through the film, I actually found myself at the end looking forward to seeing more of these stories about Enola, with occasional cameos from the rest of the Holmes family. And that's a telling factor, I think. Sitting in my study watching the film with the cat chasing cotton buds around the room, don't ask. As the film came to its quite nice little conclusion, I wanted to see more stories. I wanted to see how the characters change. I like this version of Sherlock Holmes and his relationship with his little sister, who's having her own adventures, and they don't need to be as thrilling or dangerous as her brothers, but they can be unique, and they can be fun. And there's a sense in my mind as the film comes to a close when the discussion comes up about who's Enola's ward in the absence of her mother. I was getting flashbacks of early 1950s Supergirl comics, and this being a really much more mature, less 1950s dad version of that setup. And, I can't wait for Henry Cavill to get a break from making more of The Witcher and being able to make more of these. And because Enola Holmes, it's one of the best new films I've seen this year. I mean, I know there's not an awful lot to choose from, but I strongly recommend it to everyone. If you've got daughters, then they're going to eat this up, and you're probably going to wind up watching it a lot. This film's highly recommended, and I really recommend you give it a go. Back to the pot. Let's have a look and see what we're doing next time. So, we have... Oh, man. Courtesy of Sam. Next time we've got High School Musical. Talk about jumping from one thing I'm not target audience for to the next. Thank you, Sam. Now, just before I go, I just want to touch on the fact that these reviews seem to be slowing down a bit. For the foreseeable future, I'm only going to be doing one review a week. Reason being that with the weather being as it is at the moment, the only time I can actually get out to exercise is in my lunch break. and because daylight is at a bit of a premium, and as you could probably gather watching this, I'm doing this in daylight because I don't have the appropriate lights, rather, to be able to do this once the sun goes down. And that break at lunchtime is the only chance I get to get outside during the day. So I'm going to strip this down to once a week, because it means I can record a review over the weekend and publish it over the weekend, starting from probably this Sunday. I will review this as we go on, so when we get to the spring summertime, then hopefully when it starts getting lighter in the evening, then I can go back to doing multiple reviews a week. But I am going to try and push through these 101 films as best I can. But ultimately, I need to look after myself, and I don't want to get myself stressed out doing something like this, because I know what I'm like. On that slightly dour note, thanks very much for watching. If you could consider sponsoring me, giving me a few more films to do. If you could like the video, share it, subscribe so you'll get updates when I do more. And we'll see you next time with... I've never seen this, by the way. I remember... As a quick preview, you might remember the whole thing with Twilight all those years ago when guys my age, the geek elite, who got themselves in a real fizzle about Twilight. That wasn't my jam. I remember it, just like I remember all the vitriol about the Phantom Menace when that was released. But I was definitely much in the camp of really hating High School Musical when it came out. Despite never seeing the first one, I've only seen the second and the third one when I was working on board ship. I've never seen this one before. I really need to stop going off script because I start rambling. Thank you again for watching. See you again soon.